Welcome back to the Sports Management Podcast. This episode is sponsored by Insport Education and their new online course, The Foundation of Sport Business. With course modules delivered by sport business experts at companies like the NFL, the Football Association, and Formula E, the Foundations of Sport Business course equips you with everything you need to know to get on or accelerate your career in sport. And for you listeners, I have a great deal. With the code SportsManagementPodcast10, you will get 10% off the course price. Click the link in the description below and sign up to the course today. Now, let's kick off the episode. Welcome to Sports Management Podcast, where you will hear interesting sports management professionals share their stories, experiences, and passion for the sports management industry. I am your host, Marcus Philipsson. Today's guest is Densign White, CEO at the International Mixed Martial Arts Federation, IMMAF. IMMAF is the global governing body for the sport of MMA, and they are currently working for Olympic recognition. And who is better to lead this mission than an Olympian? Mr. White is a British Judoka who has competed in 3 Olympic Games and has won a gold medal at the Commonwealth Games in 1990. In this episode, you will learn more about IMMAF's work, the sport of MMA, White's work for equality and diversity in sport, and much more. Welcome to the Sports Management Podcast, Densign White.
Hi, pleased to meet you, Marcus.
Pleased to have you on the podcast. So first of all, how are you?
Well, I'm very well, considering all the problems that we're all experiencing now with COVID. It's a very tough time for lots of people around the world, and we found it very challenging actually the last few months. We had to postpone all of our activities that required people to come together, championships and so on, and technical conferences, but we moved some things online. We didn't stop altogether. We found innovative ways to keep going and to keep the communication with our members. But we're hoping that actually this second half of the year, we're hoping to restart all of our events again, starting with the Youth World Championship in Bulgaria, Sofia. And then we have European Open Championships in Russia. And then in September, we're planning to have a World Cup event in Prague. At the end of the year, we're still planning to have the World Championships in Kazakhstan. So I think everybody's really excited about coming back together again and competing. It's been a long break for everybody, too long. And it's going to be great to see people again and to see them in person rather than through these means.
Of course. And I'm glad to hear that you have a lot of events scheduled now coming up. It's very interesting with IMMAF, and I think that MMA in general, most people associate maybe with the UFC, but it's so much bigger than that. So can you just talk to us a little bit about IMMAF, what you do, and your relationship with the different national entities?
So IMMAF is the International Mixed Martial Arts Federation, which was founded by 2 of your compatriots from Sweden, August Wallen and George Salsfeld. And they had the vision to create this international federation for amateur athletes. And so they sold the idea to the UFC, and the UFC thought it was great and have been supporting us ever since. The organization was formed in 2012, I believe in February or March of 2012. So we're coming up to our 10th birthday, early part of next year. So that should be a big celebration. And we now have national federations from around the world representing all 5 continents. I think we now have around 120 members globally. And we continue to grow. We're processing new members every week. We now have a schedule of competition around the world, continentals, European Open, Asia Open, Pan Am Open, Africa Open, and so on. And World Championships annually for seniors and under 21. And now we have the Youth World Championships, which I mentioned a short time ago, the second Youth World Championships, and they start from 12 to 17. So we really developed a lot. We run a lot of coach education programs because they didn't exist before. People kind of came into MMA from other disciplines, but there were no certification MMA courses specifically for the sport of MMA. So that's one of the things we thought was really important to do. We created a progression scheme, which is kind of like a grading system. So people that want to do MMA from a recreational point of view and have no interest in fighting in a UFC. They still need targets. They still need a progression ladder, something to aim for, to keep their motivation and to keep them in the sport. And so they can see how they're progressing towards their goals. So we've developed that as well. And we're doing a lot of refereeing and judging courses. Mark Goddard is our regulatory affairs head. And obviously everybody knows him as the most famous referees working for the UFC. And that's going really well. We've managed to certificate many, many referees and judges around the world. Obviously, with COVID, things were stalled, but we managed to persuade Mark to move some of their work online, and that's being developed. Some of the coach education stuff is now online as well. So we have platforms for both. And we're working with all these national federations. We're trying to encourage them to grow their membership. And I think culturally it's quite a difficult task in MMA because the sport actually was developed in a different way to other sports. It started with the top end and nothing was below. And so, we're kind of turning that pyramid back around. So you've got, you were developing the base, and then top of the pyramid, you have the elite, but you've got all these people, the vast majority of people that participate in sport are working at this foundation base level, recreational level. That's where the masses are. Very few people can reach the heights of the UFC, but we can't ignore the mass of people that might just want to do MMA from a recreational point of view. So we're encouraging our federations. If you want to grow, you have to recruit people into your sport who may just want to do it for recreational purposes. And so you need to have the tools to keep them in the sport, to keep them motivated. Because I know the combat sports is really tough. My background, obviously, as you know, is from judo. I was chairman of the British Judo Association for 12 years. And one of the hardest things is to keep members. It's like a revolving door. One comes in and one goes out. So our membership, at least, wasn't growing this way. It was just leveling off because we weren't able to retain the members that we managed to get so that the numbers could start going this way. And especially with young people, when they're getting around 15 or 16, it's particularly difficult because they're starting to think about boyfriends and girlfriends and going out, and maybe they're doing their A-levels, exams, school exams for you, thinking about university. So that's a difficult age to keep young people involved. So I think, the target age group for a lot of sports to keep their numbers going up is very young, from 8, even younger sometimes, from 5 years of age up to 12, 13, 14. And then you expect that you're going to get some fall off when they get to that age because of the reasons I just said. So we need to, all of our federations, we're trying to encourage them to focus on youth development. And it's very important when you're doing youth development that you also have the coaches who know how to work with young people, because training adults is very different to training children. And some people are really very skilled at working with adults, but you put them with children and they don't have the same impact. Because the kids, they like to have fun, they like to play. You need someone who's more of an entertainer working with the children to keep their enthusiasm and to keep them going. With the children, you don't get so technical. It's all about having fun and learning the fundamental skills.
Do you feel like because of the nature of the sport, that it's a very physical sport, that maybe some people are hesitant to enter the sport?
I think it's changed in recent years. We've noticed the feedback we're getting, and also the fact that we're getting, as I said, we had the Youth World Championships for the first time in 2019 in Rome, and we had no idea how many kids would enter this competition, no idea at all. And for the very first event, 25 countries entered, and we had 270 kids participating, which was incredible. It was one of the best events that I've ever attended for IMMAF. And it was just great to see these young athletes giving it their all, the enthusiasm, the discipline, the technical standard was really so high. And the kids were a credit to their federations. They were fantastic. Parents came to watch and friends. It was really one of the best atmospheres I've ever witnessed at one of our events. Incredible. And then now again, we're doing it again. Of course, we couldn't do it last year because of the COVID situation. We're doing it now in Bulgaria. And we've got even higher numbers for this event than we had 2 years ago. So now we're up to about 370 athletes, which is just incredible. So that proves that there is interest in youth development, and a lot of the countries are getting on board. It's what we are now trying to drive and what we are promoting. And, if our federations want to grow, they have to focus on young people.
Yeah, definitely. And I understand that if someone is watching a professional MMA fight, it might seem physical and aggressive. But I've done some mixed martial arts training myself, and it's just a great workout and it's fun. So, for kids, it's a very good sport to get involved with.
Yeah, of course. And the other important thing I should have mentioned regarding the youth is that we adapted the rules for young people. So we don't allow under 18s to do any kicks or punches to the head, thereby making it much safer than, some of the other combat sports that still allow children to do full punches and kicks to the head. Obviously, concussion is a big issue today, and other sports are taking it really seriously as well. So, of course, in a combat sport like ours, with the reputation that MMA already has, we need to make sure that we're not behind the curve, but in front of it. Even football is adapting their rules for young people, talking about changing the rules so that children don't head the ball anymore because of the potential damage over a long period of time if they're continually heading the ball. So we have to think about, young people, their health and well-being, and they're not fully developed adults. So they're not ready to do the full pro game of MMA. It has to be adapted to allow for their physical and psychological development.
For sure. I want to go back to what you said with Mark Goddard, that you're working with the refereeing and judging classes and courses.
Yeah.
Because it's obviously very difficult both to judge and to referee because it's a mix of so many different martial arts. I think that the judging part have been criticized a little bit more than the refereeing part. So how are you working there, and what are the prerequisites to be a judge?
Well, I think Mark's opinion is that the people who come on the refereeing course also have to be qualified to judge as well. They're not separate. So in his opinion, I think a good referee can also go and judge and understands how a match should be scored. I've been on the course. I failed, of course, because I'm not a MMA referee or a judge, but I did it just for fun, just to see how the course is run and learn about the process. And it's really good. Mark's course is kind of split in over 2 or 3 days, and there's the theoretical element to it, and then there's the practical element. So he's actually assessing the referees and watching them as they actually referee a real match. And then the judging part is more classroom based, but he's using video examples and allowing people to judge them, and then talking and explaining how that match should have been scored. It's really interesting because as a layperson, I often get it wrong, because the person that I think won the match, Mark would say, well, actually, you're wrong. This is what you should be looking for. And so maybe the things that I think as a layperson are important or look impressive, that's not what the referee is looking for. So, and I think, that's the reason why I think it's really important as well, because you talked about the criticism that referees and judges get. I think refereeing and the judging course should be an integral part of the coaching course, because I don't think most of the coaches understand the rules either that well. So I think there's an educational aspect there as well. They think they know the rules because they've been in the sport for a long time and they've been around the game. They've watched a lot of course they have, but they haven't refereed. They haven't been judges. So what they think is scoring might not necessarily be what the referee is looking for as a score. So a lot of refereeing and judging is, I think, about interpretation. I think sometimes the coaches have a different interpretation to the referees and the judges. And we don't have to get into a discussion about who's right or wrong. What matters is to understand how the referees and the judges are interpreting, even if you don't agree with it. And then once you understand that, you're going to be a better coach, because you're going to be able to train your athletes how to win matches. Actually, you can tell them what referees and judges are looking for, what actually is making the scores. So to me, that's an educational thing. And you're never going to eradicate criticism anyway. We've had criticism all the time. And then sometimes when you bring the coach to watch the video back, they end up agreeing with Mark when they watch it back in slow motion, because he can explain, he can always explain, and he's happy to explain if people want to listen. But very often, most of the complaints have no validity. It's just that, remember, the coach is biased. He wants his athlete to win. He always thinks his guy won. He's not impartial in this scenario. Whereas the judge is impartial and the referee is impartial. We don't allow judges and referees to be of the same nationality as the fighters in the field of play. We try and make sure that it's someone from a completely different, and there's no less chance for anything to be corrupted. Remember, the three judges, they have to generally agree, don't they? And they're not collaborating, they're scoring, they're in separate locations around the cage. They're not sitting together swapping notes. They're actually scoring independently. And most of the time, they're coming to the same conclusion.
That's true. It's interesting also because the sport is kind of new and it has grown so fast in a short time. It takes some time to get a hand of it. I understand that. Something else that's very interesting that I mentioned in the introduction is that IMMAF is working to get MMA into the Olympics.
Yes.
How's it going?
Well, I would have to say it's going slow. Very slow. When I joined IMMAF in 2014, that was the vision statement of IMMAF. We one day want to be an Olympic sport. So this is something that you have to take a long view of, and it's step by step. So all the things that I've just been talking about weren't in place when I started in 2014. IMMAF was a blank canvas, more or less. And now we have all of the things I believe in place to make us an Olympic sport. We've sorted out the governance side. There are certain criteria that have to be met in terms of your governance. You have to be a democratic organization. You have to have elected directors. You have to have general assemblies, so many years of general assemblies, not just one or two. And then you have to have so many years of audited accounts, which we have now, because our accounts are audited every year independently. You have to have a development plan for the next 3 or 4 year development plan. You have to have a youth development plan. You have to have training and education and information for referees and judges and coaches and so on. So all the things that I've been talking about already have been the building blocks. We needed to sort our house out first. You have to sort out the house and then present it to the International Olympic Committee when you feel you're ready. Obviously, we have to be signatory of the World Anti-Doping Agency. So for that, you had to have competitions, obviously. You have to have a competition structure. You have to be testing athletes. You have to be doing in-competition testing and out-of-competition testing. You have to be providing education for the athletes and for the coaches. So these are all the, part of all the building blocks that we've been doing. That's a big body of work that's taken time. At the same time, we have applied to WADA to be a signatory. We have applied to the Global Association of International Sports Federations, which is kind of that umbrella organization of all Olympic and non-Olympic sports. You first have to be a member of GASEF before you can become an IOC member. So the first step is GASEF and WADA and then the IOC. So we're still in the process of waiting to see if we're going to become a signatory of WADA. We applied actually 5 years ago to both organizations, WADA and GASEF. They decided that we weren't ready. There's politics involved in this as well. It's no secret that some of the other combat sports don't support MMA to be an Olympic sport. In all the conversations I've had with some of the people is that, they say things like MMA is not even a sport. It's not a suitable sport for the Olympics. It's too violent, doesn't meet Olympic values, and so on. So what we've been trying to do the last 5 years is to change the perception one of the other things we've done really well, I think, over the last 5 years is our marketing and our communication has been really good. Our online presence is very, very good. Obviously, MMA was born online really because mainstream media weren't broadcasting in the beginning. The internet was probably the savior of MMA. And now mainstream networks are now wanting to get MMA. Even the BBC in England want to broadcast MMA now. They put lots of MMA stories on their website. And I think Conor McGregor was even nominated one year as International Sports Personality of the Year.
Yeah.
It's becoming more and more mainstream. You know, UFC have got their stuff on ESPN, Fox, and all these sort of channels. So, yeah, I think, you know, in the UK, you can see MMA on Channel 5 and Channel 4. It's not just Bellator is another one that gets a lot of media here as well. So, yeah, I think it's a dream, part of the vision, but it's going to take a long time. But, you know, what I would say, Marcus, is more important than getting into the Olympics for us is getting recognition within that global body, GASEF. That's critically important for amateur MMA.
Yeah.
Because once you get recognition, then you're not perceived anymore to be this underground, you know, lawless type of activity, this criminal type of activity, which is sometimes one of the labels thrown at MMA, that it's just full of people who have criminal backgrounds and so on. So I think you get that credibility from getting recognition. And then, you know, once you've got that credibility, that will really help a lot of our national federations as well, because a lot of them can't get recognized locally where they are because their international federation isn't recognized. So very often our federations will go to their Olympic committee or go to their sports ministry, say, can we please be recognized? And the answer is, I'm sorry, we can't do it because your international federation is not a member of GASEF. Mm. So that can be a block for a lot of our member federations. And of course, once we get that recognition, it will be fantastic for the sport, because once you've got that recognition, the sport can start to get more TV coverage, even money from government to support the national federations to grow. You can get sponsorship. And I'll tell you one of the really important things that MMA needs to have, which is lacking badly across the world, is insurance. Mm. A lot of MMA is uninsured. For sure, when people in MMA go to insurance companies, very often they're being refused because MMA is not seen as a legitimate sport. So therefore, a lot of participants in MMA are doing MMA, but under the guise of other combat sports that are recognized and are established. So maybe they're part of a kickboxing club or a Muay Thai or a wrestling or some other martial art center that does a mixture of things. But the insurance isn't to do MMA specifically. The insurance is for other martial art activities that are legal, that are recognized. So I think that's one of the obstacles that we have. And the insurance is really important because we've seen it happen in other mainstream sports. Years ago, a lot of mainstream sports probably didn't take insurance that seriously until someone got hurt. And I remember a case a long time ago which involved rugby, and it was a school game. A boy went into a tackle and he ended up being paralyzed, permanent disability. The referee was sued by the parents. And so from that time, really, insurance has been taken more seriously, at least in the UK. Most governing bodies, they're required to have minimum 10 million public liability, professional indemnity. The referees are covered by professional indemnity. The directors have indemnity insurance as well. Everybody needs to be covered. That's why it comes back to the governance again. It's really important. And it comes back to this culture thing in MMA. There's no culture within MMA of MMA clubs joining the national federation because they don't see any benefits. They just see that as a cost. And then they think, well, what does that do for me? If I join the national federation, what's in it for me? Whereas in judo, you have to join the national federation. And when you join, you get insurance. The club is insured. You as an individual is insured with your membership, your individual membership. The club pays a membership. So the club is insured, the individual is insured. And if I'm practicing against someone else and I hurt someone else, there's person-to-person cover. If the coach is teaching me and he hurts me, he's got professional indemnity cover. And the club is also covered. And the association is covered if it goes that far. And it's critically important that MMA gets that recognition so we can access insurance, and not expensive insurance. I mean, when I was at British Judo, the insurance for the whole year, your membership fee was £30 a year, and £5 of that was your insurance for the whole year. It shouldn't be any more than that for MMA either. Because what are we? We're really an amalgamation of those other sports. MMA is not more dangerous than Taekwondo or Muay Thai or kickboxing or anything else.
So how is IMMAF working for this? Are you putting pressure on the different insurance companies?
We're not in a strong position to put pressure on insurance companies. They will make their own decisions. Obviously, we're making the case. And obviously, the work that we've done is a persuasive argument and should give them confidence that we are well-managed, well-regulated, we've risk-assessed everything. We've got our volunteer workforce, the referees, the judges, the coaches. They will have to go through some formal training, education, certification process. It's not that anybody who wants to roll up and open a gym or start training MMA or wants to just become an MMA judge or a referee. It can't be. It used to be like that, but it can't be anymore. But culturally in MMA, that's the way it has been. And that's why it was important to get an international federation that could pull all these things together and do what all other sports are required to do. It can't be the Wild West anymore. And my job is really difficult because, believe me, there are still some people in MMA who think it should remain the Wild West. And they don't embrace any of the changes that we've made. They hate them. I can't accept that.
This episode is sponsored by Insport Education, the online business school for sport. They offer a range of different courses, for example, Foundations of Sport Business, Private Equity in Sport, and much, much more. As a listener to this podcast, you get 10% off all of their courses using the code SportsManagementPodcast10. Click the link in the description below and sign up today. Our next sponsor is ExpressVPN. If you, like me, are tired of not being able to access different Netflix libraries in your country, or watch sports games not available in your country, then ExpressVPN is for you. All listeners of this podcast get 3 months for free when signing up for a 1-year package. Visit tryexpressvpn.com/sportsmpodcast to learn more. You can find the link in the description below. In addition to your role at IMMAF, you're also doing so many other good things. You are a council member at the Sports Integrity Global Alliance and also chairman at Sporting Equals.
Yes, actually, I was just re-elected today.
Oh, congratulations.
On the SIGA Sport Integrity Global Alliance Council. Just before this meeting, I was at the General Assembly. So I was just elected for another 4 years today. And also made a vice president of SIGA today as well. So it's very good news.
That's great. What does your role include there to work for integrity and quality?
Yes, well, the SIGA has some committees set up, and I'm a member of one of the ones that deals with gender, race, inclusion and diversity commission. And we have regular meetings and we talk about what needs to change in the sport, how we can influence change. We can highlight situations that need to improve. And the most recent thing we were talking about was, the International Swimming Federation banned the soul. It was called the soul cap. It was a cap that was made for people from ethnic communities. It's a bigger cap actually. So if you've got big hair, you could fit it inside the cap. So the International Swimming Federation banned the cap, which they've now reversed through pressure that was coming from different areas. We couldn't understand why they banned the cap because there was no performance advantage from having a bigger cap. Normally, if you want to go quicker, you need to be more aerodynamic. Wearing a bigger cap is not particularly aerodynamic and is going to help performance. So they couldn't really give any reason why they were banning it. And it's just stupid stuff like that. People just not thinking about other communities and about other people. They're not thinking about growing their sport. If you want to grow your sport, you've got to think outside the box. You've got to reach out to other communities. You've got to make your sport more accessible. And you've got to have people in the sport that reflects the society. Otherwise, people will feel as if it's not a welcoming place for them. And that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to get people to really change their mindset and start to think about how they can more proactively change the way they're thinking and the way they're doing things. You know, we should have more people of colour in sports leadership. We should have more people with disability, more people, LGBT community, you know, whatever sexual orientation you are, you should be allowed to be involved in sport as well. Nobody should feel that they can't be in sport. It's for everybody. I passionately believe that.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. And there are so many examples, except for the swimming cap. There was the outfit for tennis, that you had to wear a skirt for women's tennis. Serena Williams was going against that and she was wearing tights.
Yeah.
The hot potato right now is in beach volley and what to wear there for women.
Yeah.
So it's a very important job that you do at SIGA.
Yeah, and there's been controversies over women that want to wear hijab as well.
Yeah. For
religious purposes, so they can take part in their sport. And some of the sports are changing; they're allowing that. But there's still some sports that are still not allowing it. And as I said, they need to be more open and more respectful of all of the people. If they, you know, one of the things about being in the Olympics, Olympic sport, you can't call yourself Olympic sport and you represent Olympic values if the only values you respect are Western values.
Exactly.
No, you're supposed to be, Olympic sports are supposed to have something called universality. If you can't demonstrate that you have universality, then you shouldn't be an Olympic sport. And unfortunately, still quite a few sports that, in my opinion, don't represent universality. They talk the talk, but they're not walking the walk. They're paying lip service. They're agreeing with us. Yes, we agree. The sport should be more diverse. It should be more inclusive. We need more people of color and more women and blah, 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 blah. But they're not actually doing anything. What strategies have they in place to make sure that that happens? How are they doing that proactively? Like in IMMAF, we've done that proactively. It's cemented within our statutes. We have to have representation on the board from all the continent. We have to have minimum 30% female representation on the board. It's in the statutes now. It has to happen. So we're not just talking, we're doing. And all of this has been voted in by the members. The members agreed. We put it to the members, it's a democratic process. The members agreed unanimously with these changes. So it can be done. It just needs people to actually just do it.
I'm glad to see that you're putting a good example there for other federations to take after. I just want to ask you also from like a personal standpoint that you're a judoka. As I mentioned in the introduction, you're a judo athlete with 3 Olympics and the gold medal from Commonwealth Games under your belt. So how has your professional career as an athlete helped you, you think, now in your more managerial roles?
I think it's helped me a lot. I never dreamt when I was an athlete that I would be doing what I'm doing today and still involved in sports. And, you know, it's my job. Fantastic. It doesn't feel like a job. It's just amazing that I can do this for a job. And all the experiences that I had from my time in judo as a competitor, then as an administrator, then I worked in the international arena with judo as well. And I was a sports director in the European Judo Union for 10 years. I think all of that experience, that collective experience, they're actually unique experiences. I don't think there are many people like me that have gone through that whole pathway from elite athlete, administrator, to coming into CEO position in an international sports federation. So I think in that respect, I think I might be a little bit unique, but I think it definitely has helped me because I try not to lose touch with what it's like to be an athlete. You know, we've got to always remember why we're doing this. We're doing it for the athletes, make life better for them, make the sport safer for them, and that they can have really great experiences like these young people who are going to the Youth World Championships. They're coming from all over the world. Some of them have never traveled before. First time they're traveling to come to an MMA international event. How amazing is that? I mean, they're never going to forget that for the rest of their lives. And when you see them on the rostrum and their anthems are playing and they're crying, that whole emotion of being the best in the world in front of your family and your friends. And it's just an amazing thing for the kids and for their family and friends, for their federations. And they can go back with pride. They go back and they can celebrate together. They can go to their ministries, Olympic Committee, say, you know, look at what we achieved. And it really does make a difference in terms of how people look at the sport. Yeah, I think my experiences have really helped me in the job I'm doing today. And, you know, I learned a lot, especially when I was with judo, especially when I was working with the European Judo Union. Those are the best 10 years of my life, working in the European Judo Union as a sports director. I really enjoyed it. I worked in a fantastic team and I learned so much from those individuals. They were an amazing group of people. In terms of a school for learning about how to manage sports and how to manage elite sports and how to lead at this level, we couldn't have a better school than that.
I'm glad to hear it. And I think it's important for someone who works with sport to have an experience. And I mean, you have the experience from the highest level. So I think that's very important that, as you said, you can understand the athletes, what they need and what they are going through. And then with your managerial experience that you're gaining, you can make decision based on that, but also based on what you know that the athletes need.
That's exactly right.
Approaching the end here, is there something that I haven't asked you that you feel is important to mention?
I think we covered quite a few of the important aspects of the work that I'm doing. You know, obviously the vision for the sport is really important. You know, that Olympic dream is still there. I think it's a long way from here, but, you know, it's still a vision. It's important for an organization to have a vision, even if it may seem unrealistic. The important thing, I think, for MMA is that we keep this unity within the sport. The worst thing that could happen for MMA now is that we start to fragment. 3 years ago, we were fragmented because there was the World Mixed Martial Arts Association, which was formed at around the same time as IMMAF in 2012. And we were moving in parallel to each other, doing the same things, which, you know, doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? They're spending resources, we're spending resources, doing exactly the same thing, trying to go in the same direction. And, you know, finally we came together and we merged in 2018. We went to a membership meeting in Lausanne and they said to us, there's no chance for you to be recognized whilst you're working separately and you have this rivalry, because how are we supposed to know who is the legitimate organization? We can only have one member for MMA. We can't have two. So you guys need to go and work it out. And then when you've worked it out, you can come back again. So we did go away and work it out. We merged in 2018. Now we're one organization working together for the benefit of the sport. But not everybody wanted that merger to happen. And unfortunately, there was a group that broke away or were kicked out of WAMA, who went away and formed a new international federation. Anyway, they're there and it's kind of a distraction and it's not helpful to what we're trying to do, because they're drawing attention away from what we're doing and onto what they're doing, and almost trying to create another rivalry situation that GASEF could well come back and say, well, okay, you sorted this one out, now you've got this thing over here. And they could present the same arguments again, which would not be realistic now, because we've come so far since the 5 years since we made the first application to GASEF. We've come so far, and this other organisation hasn't really done anything, but it's still there. And because of the politics, it's convenient for GASEF to be able to say, well, the problem isn't that you've got a rivalry with us, which is really what is happening. They see us as a rival to them. They want to push it away and say, you guys haven't sorted yourselves out. You're still a fragmented, divided sport, so you can't come in. We're not going to let you in the tent. So my appeal to the guys out there who want to do their own thing, even the guys within our structure who want to do their own thing, don't see the value of governance and regulation, I would plead with them to really rethink, what they're thinking, because it's wrong-headed and it's not going to be helpful to what we're trying to achieve. MMA only has a future if we can get regulated.
Of course, we need regulation. Before we sign off here, the last question that I ask is if you could choose the next guest on this podcast, who do you think that I should talk to?
I think someone like Mark Goddard, it'd be good to get him on, because he speaks very well, especially around the need for, the regulation of the sport and the health and the safety of the athletes and all the things we're doing, which I didn't mention, around the medical protocols that we do is second to none. Our medical protocols is gold standard for people to compete in our events. They have to do medicals, they have to do blood works for hepatitis, A and B, HIV. We do brain scans for anyone who's knocked out and so on. We have concussion policies. We have pre-fight, post-fight medical examinations, anti-doping at all our competitions. I think we are really gold standard in terms of taking care of the health and well-being of the athletes. And of course, critically important as well is making sure that the people who are refereeing are certificated. We don't just, Mark doesn't just call up his friend, say, "Oi, there's an event happening next week. Do you want to take part?" Which is what most professional promoters are still doing. We're training the people. We've got a trained workforce, which is actually supporting the professional promoters because they're now using our trained people Mark has trained. You know what I mean? So we've got a pool of people. I don't know how many, maybe now 100 or 200 people that have been trained by Mark Goddard, IMMAF certificated. They can go out and referee any level of competition. Really important. And Mark is really hot on that stuff. And then there's all the stuff we've done around research, around the protective equipment, like the gloves. We've done a lot of research around making sure the glove is good quality, made amendments, design amendments to it to make sure that, the athletes can't poke in the eye so we've curved it and it's a heavier glove so we get less cuts and knockouts. Shin pads have been modified as well so the foot doesn't slip out, and all these different things we've done over the years. As we've learned about the equipment, we've modified it. We bring all the equipment to the event, so no one's bringing their own equipment. We bring it there, we get it shipped. Stuff can't be tampered with. After each fight, they have to give it back. They get it back if they go through to the next round. These are all the things that we're doing that are really protecting the athletes. I think a lot of people don't understand how deep we've gone into this thing.
And that's why it's so important that we talk about this so people know and understand what you are doing. Densign, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Sports Management Podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Sports Management Podcast. Please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. Also, feel free to leave a comment about what you thought about this episode. If you want to get in contact with me, send an email to sportsmpodcast@gmail.com or hit me up on Facebook, Twitter or Instagram @sportsmpodcast.